There's a lot of staples of Always Sunny's comedy that have shown themselves across the new Season 17. There's always going to be some irony of the gang not realizing how insane they're being, and that's happened in every episode. The depravity of the group has really reared its ugly head in the last couple of installments, especially at the dog track. This episode, though, episode 7, is almost entirely focused around a different trait: surrealism. Episode 7, The Gang Gets Ready for Primetime, is simply a surreal episode full of awkwardness that doesn't just make you cringe, but also scratch your head in confusion. In trying to prepare for Frank's Bachelor episode, Dennis forces the group to over-prepare for a supposed dinner party where they may get their big break. Obviously, we as the audience kinda know that a big break is never gonna come to fruition, but it's more about how things will go wrong, and that is certainly a trip. Let's begin. The majority of this episode is reserved to a single set, which is, I believe, Dee's apartment redesigned to fit an audience of people all observing and critiquing the gang on their dinner behavior. The whole thing seems to be moderated by a character credited as Moderator Mike, played by Eddie Shin, and right off the bat, my biggest disappointment with this episode personally was that we never really learn anything about this character. He simply shows up, and we assume that he has been hired by the gang, but we don't get any elaboration on how he feels about the whole thing, or how he got involved specifically, which I feel like was a missed opportunity. Nevertheless, once the gang enters, things immediately get interesting. Mac and Dee are both on top of their game here. Dee actually gets some love from the crowd, since she's the only one treating the performance like the comedy they view it as, and it's actually sorta sweet. She begins the episode pretty grounded, and quietly calls out Dennis for ruining the entire plan. Though as soon as she gets a single bit of love, she goes over the top with it and fails spectacularly, as you'd expect. The moment where she pulls a full trombone out of goddamn nowhere, as if it was just there the whole time, was such a left field moment that really got me. This episode is also the full-scale return of Badass Mac, complete with a fake mustache in an attempt to look straight that he compares to, of all people, Freddie Mercury. The second iteration of the dinner party is just all about Mac for me because he ends it with the stunt from the trailer in which he attempts to backflip off a chair and instead kicks the lamp with such force that it basically explodes. Despite this, I feel like Mac wasn't presented entirely as a loser because the crowd actually loves it, and it's built up to with his sort of Steven Seagal impression and a beautiful usage of the song Warrior by Stan Bush. Like, sure, Mac can't do stunts for shit, but I do think that he could take his show on the road as a sort of jackass thing, and people would love it. Charlie also makes a hell of a statement when he loses all of the hair on his head by mixing up shampoo and hair removal, though I overall wouldn't say his contributions to the episode were as strong as the others. Still no real negatives, though. On top of this, there are a few guest performances. There's a second waitress appearance, and although she doesn't really do anything, making her part in the episode pretty unremarkable, I always love when a person with extreme hatred for the gang ends up blending right in with no animosity. It adds to my theory that the waitress is the most malleable character in the show. The real crazy appearance comes from Artemis, however, who I've always seen as a bit of an overrated character, but who really shows up in episode 7 with an actually terrifying Frank cosplay, which makes her completely unrecognizable. I don't know how they did this, and I don't really want to know how they did this, but if there's anyone who could play Frank, it probably is Artemis, and she's great in this. The real star of the show, of course, is Dennis. Glenn Howerton finally gets an episode where he gets to fully channel his intensity and rage, something that he always buries instead of releasing like Dee does. For this reason, Dennis has the most subtle humor of the gang, and so even in just playing back the episode to check specific moments, I found a multitude of expressions and gestures that Glenn is doing in the background, like when he prompts Dee for her lines with this annoyed slight shove. I mean this completely as a compliment. Glenn Howerton plays a man on the brink of suicide at all times better than any actor I've ever seen. Because of Dennis's insecurities, he continues to tape back his skin every time that the audience comments on his age showing, and by the end of the episode, he looks actively insane, his eyebrows permanently arched in this unnatural Jack Nicholson way. And I'm gonna be honest, I actually think the Jack Nicholson thing is intentional, given the way that Dennis begins to speak when the third dinner breaks down again and he delivers an Emmy Award-winning monologue revealing his intentions. In a multiple seasons long throwback, we find out that Dennis is still being affected by his complete mental break on Family Fight, which honestly makes sense, considering he is the only person in the gang who doesn't easily bounce back from failure. This monologue has so much going for it. The lighting is changed to put a spotlight on Dennis specifically while the entire room dims and a chilling classical piece of score begins to play, much like some of Dennis's previous psychotic episodes. In the second half of the scene, Glenn begins to stutter so long that it wraps back around to being hilarious, the longest stutter lasting an entire 7 or 8 seconds, and by the end, he starts begging in a sympathetic tone like Norman Bates himself. No joke, this scene is some of the most impressive dramatic acting I may have seen across this entire 17-season-long sitcom. Ladies and gentlemen, Glenn Howerton went to Juilliard. The final close to this episode, in yet another twist, which this season seems to love, is that Frank's Bachelor episode has actually already been recorded, since the gang took a full month just to prepare, and Frank had them replaced with actors anyways. Honestly, this is completely in character, as the group does easily get distracted and spend way too long on simple things all the time, and Frank has been in peak dipshit status this season. It's a very appropriate ending, and it also implies that Frank will be the only member of the group to appear in Episode 8 at all, which is a big swing from the creators if true, but Danny is probably the best choice to fly solo. Episode 7 surprised me many times. Given that it seemed to just be a setup episode, I figured that we'd mostly see gags and cameo appearances, and I certainly believed that Frank would show up, and yet, no, it's instead one of the more produced and experimental episodes of the season, and all of the trash man is reserved for the finale. Despite all the subversions, I'm actually very happy that this episode wasn't what I thought it would be. It could have easily been a complete throwaway and only act as build-up, but it ended up functioning perfectly on its own and may even work as a good introduction to the personalities of all the members of the gang, except Frank, and it's been a long time since we've had an episode like that. This is an 8.5 out of 10 for me, and one of the season's best so far. The Golden Bachelor Live is our final episode, and since episodes filmed in a completely different style are typically not really my thing, I predict the finale will either be a massive hit or a massive miss, and nothing in between. No matter what, it'll be the biggest event since Abbott, so keep tabs on this channel to see my review next week. Bye now.